I want to get to the UAE president now, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. He's going to travel to Russia in the coming hours to meet with his counterpart, Vladimir Putin. It's according to the state-run news agency from the UAE side. The visit comes as the Russian president threatens more missile attacks on Ukraine after hitting Kiev and other cities. Simone Foxman has more. So, Simone, what are some of the items on the agenda that have come through?
Well, I mean, certainly we believe that the conflict in Ukraine is something that the two will discuss. But there was a pretty generic statement out of the UAE state-run news agency. There's clearly the hope here, and that was said by a former finance minister on Twitter, that this meeting could help diffuse the war in Ukraine, essentially diffuse a European war. I think tangible evidence that that will happen still remains unlikely. You know, we've seen a real increase in the kind of involvement that Mideast players, the UAE among them, have really had in this ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Yes, oil prices are helping their bottom line, but ultimately countries like the Emirates are stuck between two major important strategic powers. For the UAE, they face ongoing scrutiny about lack of imposition of sanctions. There's a lot of Russian money flowing into the country, and that's something that gets raised by partners like the United States. Similar reasons, we saw the Qatari Emir call Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Apparently those two had a chat about the international situation and what more they could do at the UN venue. We've seen Saudi, UAE, Turkey involved in prisoner swaps. We'll see what comes from this meeting today. I think expectations are low, even if hopes are high.
Yeah, I would never discount a potential surprise with the United Arab Emirates. They have surprised in the past, including when they normalized relations with Israel. In the meantime, a U.S. senator has urged a freeze on all cooperation with Saudi Arabia. It's a pretty significant development given some of the arms deals that are in existence.
Yeah, this New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, this isn't the first time that he's pursuing policies to try and freeze arms sales to Saudi Arabia in particular, and also occasionally the UAE. The difference in what's happening here is just who's sitting in the presidency, because these moves were particularly prominent under the presidency of Donald Trump. But now that we have a Biden administration in office, and a Biden administration that's seemingly a little less happy with Saudi Arabia over just the past couple of weeks, we're seeing a higher potential for some of these policies to potentially go through. And so Menendez here calling for the end of any cooperation with Saudi Arabia until it reassesses its position with respect to the war in Ukraine. So tying the Saudi oil move to what's happening in broader U.S. policy. This isn't actually the only thing that's going on that we have to pay attention to from Washington. Congressmen's bipartisan group of congressmen are now pushing for a bill called NOPEC, which would cause the U.S. Department of Justice to potentially file suit to break up the OPEC plus cartel. That could have an impact even just if this legislation moves forward a little bit.
And then briefly on QNB, they kicked off earnings season yesterday. What were some of the highlights?
Yeah, profit for the 9-month period rising 7%, but we saw a pretty sharp decline in the share price after these numbers were reported, and that may be because investors expected we'd see a net income of about 14 billion QAR, and instead they got 11 billion QAR for the period. Other important things to watch: asset growth rising about 5%. That's something we pay a lot of attention to. We'll be looking at loan growth as well. We saw NPLs, non-performing loans, relatively stable in the books, so that's maybe a positive sign for investors. We'll hopefully get more details on this, more details on the drag that Turkey is also having on the bank when we hear their earnings call on October 12th.